Sword Art Online. What a divisive little show. Loved by many, hated by just as many. Where did I pull that statistic from? My Assassin's Creed hole, of course. It's the perfect example of how to start a show off in a rather strong fashion and then completely forget what you were doing there in the first place. I mean, I don't think I've seen a show, let alone an anime, that nosedived as hard as this did. Except maybe for Rurouni Kenshin, from Season 2 to Season 3. But at least it had that first story arc in Season 3 to ease you into the shit. At least that was semi-okay. With Season 1 of SAO halfway through, it goes from pretty good to immediate shit. Was it like this in the original manga? If so, please let me know by sending an email to www.swordartfanboy@aol.com. So, now that we've established that I am nowhere near qualified to review this show, let's review this show. As a disclaimer, I'm reviewing only the first half of Season 1. It was structured to be its own standalone thing, and I will treat it as such. Besides, it'll give me the chance to detail what makes this anime so... The premise of this show is basically a kiddie version of The Matrix. Players must use virtual reality gear to enter an MMORPG world full of mystical creatures, dazzling landscapes, swords, and other sharp objects. You'd think most people would get bored with such a limited variety of weapons and playstyles. I don't know. Maybe it was also advertised as being
the first game with real-life swordplay that isn't just mindless hacking and slashing, but also thrusting. Lots and lots of thrusting.
Guess the mages and rogues can get fucked. Anyway, after the first 10,000 people or so log into the game on day 1, they soon find out that they cannot log back out. As it turns out, this was all part of the creator of the game's plan, Seto Kaiba. Before the game's launch, he rigged it so that players couldn't log out from within the game, and there would now be permadeaths in-game. And when a player dies, their VR helmets, being previously bombarded with solar radiation to create a magnetron, will have
a beam's gonna fly right into their eyes like Raiders of the Lost Ark!
And kill them, IDK. Or is it IRL? Also, if someone tries to remove the helmet from the player, they still get a brain full of solar radiation. And as a kicker, everyone's avatar now looks like the player in IRA. The point is that everyone's fucked, and the only way to get out is to beat the game, which would then end SAO and free everyone. This leads to some rather interesting ideas and story threads. How would mostly teens and 20-somethings deal in this life or death scenario? Without the blanket of anonymity, would people, who would otherwise hide behind it, still try to shirk moral responsibilities and ideals? A lot of interesting themes run through this show, and it's part of what makes Sword Art Online great. Well, mostly. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that aside from all that, this show is also primarily about the not-so-subtly hinted at in the OP romance between the lead characters, Kirito and Asuna. It's handled as best as you'd expect. Both characters are written so that they have their different strengths and weaknesses, but complement each other to form a good team. It's nice to see a female romantic interest being portrayed as the male main character's equal. A literal partner in life, if you will, even though it's eventually revealed that Kirito is basically the Jesus of this universe, and thus has no equal.
Fuck it.
So, while we're at it, let's go ahead and talk about the cast of characters of Sword Art Online. So you got the main character, a wimpy-looking, presumably socially awkward loner who likes his trench coats in the color black. New much? You got the buddy/sidekick, a goofy man-child that thinks he isn't cool but is in fact the coolest character of them all. Also, you got the token black character, which Japan still has trouble portraying in a non-racist way, for some reason.
I thought we were tight, man! Don't go slandering my good name, brother.
Then you've got the main antagonist, a level-headed crazy person that is somehow vindicated of all his horrific crimes at the end of Season 1. Anakin baby-murdering Skywalker much. And finally, you got all the female characters. I already talked about Asuna and how she's a strong female character in her own right, but everyone else is a little more tricky to explain. They're all supporting one-off characters who have their own little episodes where they get to go on an adventure and co-star with Kirito. One's shy, another is a dragon tamer, and the last one is a blacksmith. I think there was a fourth, but she was part of a rather forgettable story arc, and I don't remember much of her other than she was involved in a conspiracy to avenge Casper. Or something like that. I'd go into more detail about each female character because they all do honestly have some depth to them, arguably more so than the men, but I can't get over the fact that they all seem to share one character trait. that they all want to be with Kirito. Literally every female character introduced in this show secretly wants this guy's, affection. I mean, for fuck's sake, I even think that one woman antagonist tried to make a weird pass on this guy. See, I wouldn't have a problem with this being a character trait for one or maybe two of them, but nearly all of them? Maybe if he was more like Spike Spiegel or Kamina, I guess the guy is alright, but I find it hard to believe that all female characters would feel that way towards a wimpy-looking, presumably socially awkward loner who likes his trench coats and the color black. It's almost as if they wrote all this that way to try and draw interest from the socially awkward male anime nerd audience or something. Oh, no. So what about Kirito as the main character? Well, like I said, he's alright. He's no Simon or Ryuko. Oh god, can they tell that I'm a huge Gainax Trigger fan? Oh, fuck. But he gets the job done as an interesting main character. He goes through some shit early on, and it develops him into being this soloer or whatever. He then eventually begins to see the value of sharing the burden with others until he's finally able to open himself up to Asuna, the love of his life. It's simple, sure, but it's a nice character arc that helps add to the touching romance between these two. Aside from that, there was an old man who liked the smell of fish. I think I even saw Brock once or twice. On to the plot. So after Satan lays down the new ground rules, Kirito and everyone else begin to fumble through the game in their own way. After a few months have passed and everyone begins to settle down from the initial shock of the new rules, get good or get fucked, Kirito reveals that roughly 2,000 players have now died.
2,000 people have died so far.
What? I thought they were still on the first floor. You know, the easiest area of the entire game? How has 1/5 of the player population already bidded in just a few months?
Since the game began, a whole month has gone by.
Oh, my mistake, it's actually only been 1 month. Yeah, okay, that makes way more sense.
Nah.
Oh. Oh geez, well, that certainly doesn't help. But I still can't imagine that many people would commit seppuku in that short of time. I don't know, maybe they all got killed by those mid-level bosses.
I thought that thing was a mid-level boss.
So after that shockingly unrealistic info dump, Kirito also says that
We're having a meeting to figure out how to find and defeat the Floor 1 boss.
during this meeting, it's revealed where the first boss is and how they're going to defeat it. This is also the scene where Token Black character gets introduced, and where Kirito begins to show signs that he's a huge coward. When some guy starts calling out the beta testers that might be in the crowd in a rather unconvincing manner, Kirito actually begins to fold under the pressure that this nobody is putting on him. But then Token Black Guy stands up and says,
The item store hands these out for free. It's a guidebook. You got one, didn't you?
Sure, I got one. So what about it?
You know who was handing these out? The ex-beta testers. Listen up. Everyone had equal access to this information.
so if those handbooks are so common, how come Kirito hadn't heard of them, or, if he had, used them to defend himself? I'm assuming it's the former since this wimp started to show signs of buckling. If that's the case, then how did he not know about them himself? I mean, sure, he's a loner, but it's not like he's a guy who's out of the loop. This is just one example of the many attempts at drama that this show tries to make. But it's created out of either inconsistency or convenience towards furthering the plot. In other words, stupidity. But I'll get more into that later. Anywho, after that nonsense, Kirito parties up with some weirdo in a cloak. After they chat a little, break bread, and go over their game plan a bit, the raid group arrives at the boss's door, when the group leader, I think his name is Diablo, gives this rousing speech.
Listen up, everyone. I've only got one thing to say to you. Let's win!
Lead me to hell, King Henry. I'll follow you all the way. They charge in, fight the boss and his minions, when suddenly Captain Bluehair forgoes their original plan and tries to finish the boss off himself. He gets bodied and Kirito rushes to help him. But instead of taking the potion that would, keep him from fucking dying, Bluehair instead takes the time to tell Kirito that he knows he was a beta tester, and to ask that Kirito be the one to beat the boss, only to reveal that he was a beta tester himself and had planned all along to snatch the super item for himself, painting him into the image of being kind of a manipulative dick. First of all, why would Diablo do this? Couldn't he have just taken the potion real quick, got back in the fight, killed the boss, maybe not get the item but be glad he's not dead, and then tell Kirito what he knew? I guess the writers had to come up with some way to make him not come across as a huge douche for forming the group to go on a mission where everyone could have easily died, only to get his hands on some fucking coat. Wow, what a paragon of truth and nobility. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels drag thee to hell. Wait, that don't make no sense. Then Kirito and Cloaked Guy, revealed to be Asuna, attack the boss, kicking its ass, even though Asuna doesn't know anything about this game or MMOs in general, and yet she turns out to be like one of the best badasses with a sword ever. Fuck it too, I guess. And effectively clearing the first floor for everyone. I think. The group begins to celebrate when suddenly...
Stop cheering! Why'd you do it, huh? Why'd you let Diablo die? Admit it, you knew the technique the boss was gonna use. You could have told us! Then Diablo would have stood a chance. He wouldn't have had to die!
How do you know that Kirito always knew what exactly would happen in this boss fight? Didn't he call out to Diablo and try to warn him about it? What, you couldn't hear the shock and concern in his voice when he said it?
Wait, stop! It's no good! Get out of there!
Couldn't you also tell that the boss's weapon was different from a... What the fuck was it called?
Curved sword-type weapon called a talwar.
Oh right, that. And extrapolate that his moveset might be different, when at the meeting before it's mentioned that each boss weapon has its own unique moves and attacks?
He can change his patterns of attack too.
Then some other rando starts jumping to conclusions and making shit up.
I know why he knew! He used to be a beta tester! Think about it! He knew the boss's attack patterns! He knew, but he kept it from us!
If he was a beta tester, like the guys who wrote the guidebook that you followed in order to beat the boss, then how could he have known about the weapon change-up if the guidebook didn't mention it? Thus implying that most, if not all, of the other beta testers didn't know about it either. See what I mean by creating drama out of stupidity? But as if that isn't nonsensical enough, Kirito then responds with this.
So you guys think I used to be a beta tester? It's not cool to put me in the same class with those noobs. During the beta, I made it to floors that were higher than any of the other testers. That's a fact. I knew about the boss, because I fought tons of monsters with way more sword skills on higher floors.
I thought he said he only got to floor 8.
Mind if I ask how far you got in the beta?
2 months and I couldn't get further than floor 8.
Is he lying? If so, why? This wouldn't be so much of a problem if we could clearly tell what he's lying about. So then let's say he's lying about being the ultimate beta tester. What is he doing this for? To give them a common enemy to unite against? Is he trying to rectify the opinions of others towards beta testers by giving them something worse to hate?
Most of the 1,000 people who scored a slot in SAO's beta were rookies. Even you guys are better than they were.
Based on the dying wishes of General Custard?
You're worse than a beta tester! You're a goddamn cheater, that's what you are!
He's a beta tester and a cheater! He's a beater!
How did he cheat, though? He's better than you, and thus he must have cheated? There's some gaps in logic going on here, if you couldn't tell already.